What's up, guys? Welcome to the first episode of the Sharp Objects Companion Podcast presented by The Disorderly. TheDisorderly.com, the best in sports entertainment. Head over to Disorderly Media on Twitter, Disorderly ENT on Facebook. And my name is Nick Rizner. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Rizner, NickRizner. So today we're discussing the series premiere. Season 1, Episode 1, Vanish. From what we understand, I know that there's obviously some wiggle room here because we saw what happened with Big Little Lies. But from what we understand with this is a 1-season, 8-episode, tight little miniseries, and that's what we're dealing with here. So it's not a big investment. It should just be that. Full disclosure, I've actually read this book, but I read it years back. So I don't know how much it'll tie in. I don't really remember much. I'll be honest, I'm watching, throughout this episode, and certain character names sound familiar to me, certain plot points. Settings here and there, but either way, I'll just keep it to what we learn in the episodes. I won't go ahead at all. You're just gonna have to trust me on that, but I won't. You can trust my poor memory, and even if I wanted to, I don't think I can reveal anything. But I'll be very careful about not doing that. I will not give you anything else that I wouldn't have picked up on from the episode that we just watched. There should be no risk there at all. And that's sort of how we'll establish the baseline of this particular podcast. Obviously, we have a podcast for Succession. If you're catching up on Westworld Season 2, I did a companion podcast for that as well. We mixed in different things, reviews and stuff. I'm going to have a Glow Season 2 review coming out later this week. So if you subscribe to the Disorderly Podcast, or if you're on YouTube, just subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll find all that stuff everywhere. But we're on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Laughable. Laughable is a great app. If you aren't happy with the interface of Stitcher or iTunes or whatever it's called now, I think it's called Apple Podcasts, where they're going to now. But whatever they're calling it, I prefer Laughable. I watch it on Laughable or listen to my podcast on Laughable. So I would check that out. I know that they hooked us up and put us on their app as well. So wherever you're listening to us, we appreciate it. And we'll get to it right now. So my initial thoughts, my first impression is that it was wonderfully shot. It had this sort of grit, and if you watch the episode, I feel like you can probably see where I'm coming from, with this thought. It had this sort of grit that True Detective had. Actually, I would say season one was better, but it's both seasons had the same grit to it or whatever. You know what I mean? Like a dark, sort of slow burn, but there's something wrong, and you can kind of sense it, but they don't explicitly tell you. Whatever it is, it had that feel to it, which is perfect. I will say this, having read the book, no, I'm not going ahead, no spoilers, but having read the book, that is the vibe of the book. That's the sort of vibe that it gave out, so I'm glad that the show captured it. If you guys haven't seen, so this is by Gillian Flynn, by the way, who's the same author that wrote Gone Girl, which obviously was a massive, super, whatever the book equivalent of going viral is. It was a huge hit. Huge. Everyone was talking about Gone Girl. They obviously turned it into a movie starring Ben Affleck. Pretty good movie. Actually, that was a little overrated, but I'm not going to get into all that. But there's another movie. So she's written 3 books, as far as I know, unless there's a new one. But when I first divulged in these books a couple years back, she had written 3. One was Gone Girl, obviously the most popular one. The other one was Dark Places, which they made a Charlize Theron, led film about dark places. And I actually, I liked it. I remember looking, so I read the book and I was like, oh, there's a movie, I'll check it out. I remember the reviews being very subpar, but I liked it. I actually liked that movie. I thought it wasn't bad at all. Maybe because I read the book, so it's cool to kind of see a visualization of it. I don't know if you went in cold without reading the book, if it would be as good. Say they didn't explain plots and I just kind of knew it. I don't know, but I like Dark Places. I thought it was solid. Sharp Objects, honestly, out of those 3 books that she wrote, Sharp Objects, Dark Places, and Gone Girl, Sharp Objects was my favorite. It's dark and twisted, which you can tell from season 1, and it's gonna keep that pace, if not get worse, depending on what your sensibilities are. It's literally child murders, and you see a bunch of scars all over this girl's arms, or her whole body, rather. So clearly there's some issues going on. I think we saw 3 dead children in the first episode, or maybe 2. I think they just alluded to the first one, but whatever. If you're going to throw out 3 dead kids in the beginning of a series premiere, you're dealing with some mature content there. But it's great. This is my favorite book by her, and I'm excited about it. Obviously, the cast, everything else is, they're not half-assing this. You have Amy Adams and whatever. So we'll get into it. But I thought it was wonderfully shot. They did an excellent job explaining the main character, explaining who she was without sort of, literally explaining it. They weren't it wasn't narrative. It wasn't dialogue that introduced you to this stuff. It was like a series of really clever camera angles and shots and things like that essentially show you that she's a troubled alcoholic with a troubled past, and it was eerily tied in with the younger version of herself, whether it be through dreams or hallucinations. And honestly, even with the cleverness of catching herself in the mirror and seeing the younger version of herself, or right away, the initial scene where the child version of herself is, running through the fields, goes into her childhood home, goes upstairs, peeks in a window. The camera doesn't cut away. It's still the child. Peeks in a bedroom door or whatever, and sees an Obama poster. You're like, wait a second. This is clearly from the past. So how is there an Obama poster? And then she walks into another bedroom and sees Amy Adams laying there and kind of pokes her, and you realize Amy Adams wakes up from the dream. So it's like the child version of Amy Adams just woke up from a dream. But the way they shot it was just really cool. And if they're going to do that right off the bat, you're dealing with some next level, really, really high level, television magic. But I loved that, man. And honestly, even the fact that everything she grabbed throughout the entire thing was travel size, whether it be, nips, she was drinking all her alcohol out of nips, or a travel size bottle of Listerine or whatever. And I mean, honestly, that could easily be explained. I'll get into the plot in a second, but that could easily be explained by the fact that she is literally traveling right now. So it makes sense that she'd have small travel size items. But I read into some symbolism there, because I feel like it also, not symbolism necessarily, but it really, it's a physical reminder that's constantly reminding the audience that this isn't her home. She grew up here, but this is not her home. She's very much a visitor. She's very much traveling through. She doesn't feel at home here, which I thought was interesting. And to be honest, and I have to go back, but I really think, I'm pretty sure when they showed her in the apartment, she was also drinking a nip, which would emphasize that she really doesn't feel at home anywhere. Now, that's how I read it. That could be a coincidence. I read that as symbolism. But either way, it seems like it's, I don't know, whatever. It added something for me. You never know what writers' intentions are, but if they just accidentally stumble backwards into it, I took something from that. So congratulations. They're either lucky or smart. I'll take either. But let's get to some of the finer points. So the main character is named Camille Preaker. First of all, she's a great combination of Amy Adams in present day, the movie star, obviously, and Sophia Lillis, who you guys probably know from the new It movie. She's the redhead who played Beverly Marsh, the one girl in the Losers Club. And as I noted when I first saw that movie, she was the finest actor by far in a cast that included Bill Skarsgård, who's an incredible actor, especially in that horror genre. He's excellent. And Finn Wolfhard, who obviously is one of the main leads. Actually, I would say probably the clear-cut lead, except for maybe 11, whatever, in Stranger Things. So these are some pretty fine actors, even child actors, some pretty fine child actors. And I think Sophia Lillis, who I've never seen anything before that, stole the show. Like, just the way she emotes with her face and just her, raw acting chops. She's a child, but you can tell she's not just a child. It's almost like when you saw Haley Joel Osment as a kid and you were like, oh, this isn't just a regular kid actor. This person has, like, legit acting ability. And I feel like I noticed that in It. And even in this first episode of Sharp Objects, I feel like we're seeing that same sort of thing. So huge high hopes for her. So this first episode had, a lot of setup. It's the first episode. It's a series premiere, so there's a lot of setup. Not a whole lot of, like, real plot yet. I mean, I guess there was just definitely hints of it, but nothing, really major as far as the progression of the plot. It's more sort of getting some more information on the backstories and things like that. But basically, we know that there was a child murder sometime in the past. In the recent past, and another child's gone missing. So Camille, who grew up in Wind Gap, she's now a newspaper journalist. She's been sent back to her hometown to write a story on what could potentially be some sort of small town serial killer. It's immediately evident that there's a clear estranged relationship between Camille and her mother, Camille and just the town in general, but specifically with her mother, who sort of continues to refer to her as a visitor. She doesn't really show any warmth at all. It's very, it's a cold, like, oh, visitors usually stay in this room, and the house isn't set for visitors. It's a weird way to describe your daughter. You know what I mean? That's not typically how you describe family. So it's clear that there's just no warmth there. It's very, estranged. And she also has a half sister that we don't really see for most of the episode, or so we think, because at the end we find out that this half sister is actually the teenager that she's been seeing around town. She doesn't recognize her because she hasn't talked to her family, hasn't seen any updated Christmas cards or whatever. I think that's what she says, but she's being a little facetious. I think basically she doesn't really talk to her family anymore. So she probably saw her half-sister when she was young, but not at all recently. So we find out that it's her, and it's very suspicious, the whole thing, because obviously Camille, she has this half-sister, Emma. She knows this, but the big difference is when you actually see her in the household setting for the first time, which doesn't come until the end of the episode, but she's a completely different person. So she's very different when she's at home versus who she is out with her friends, which is normal for a teenage girl, right? But this is almost like an extreme. Like she's almost like childlike. So she's in high school, I assume, right, or maybe middle school, but like she's older, she's a teenager. And when she's at home, she's almost like a child, and she even alludes to the fact that her mother dressed her up like a doll. It's a very clear split. And Emma actually goes as far as to literally point this out, because she's talking to Amy Adams' character, and she's saying, Mom always said you were incorrigible when you were young. Well, so am I. I just better at hiding it, or whatever she said. So she's basically saying, like, I'm as much of a troublemaker rebel as you were, except I hide it from them. Or I think she said that they just don't know it, or whatever. But it was a pretty, there's a lot of foreshadowing in that line right there. And finally, through a series of flashbacks, we discover that Camille also had a younger sister. This is going on, throughout the entire episode. The younger sister died as a child. Camille, understandably, did not handle this death well. We see her kind of freak out at the funeral. It seems like this really is what drove the wedge between Camille and her family. As if there might have been some inklings of it before, but this is kind of where the snap occurred. And the last image of the episode is a shot of present-day Camille, Amy Adams, taking a bath, and you can see all over her body, her arms, her legs, her back, everything. There's scars from her cutting. And it's not just regular cutting either. It's like she's literally carving words into her body or whatever. So we see the lasting shot. She cut the word Vanish into her body, which is the name of the episode. So full circle there. But yeah, a lot to unpack. So we know all this crazy stuff happened. We're starting to understand the family dynamic. We understand that, whatever happened probably has something to do with the fact that I don't mean the murders. I mean, whatever happened with the Camille character and how she sort of broke down and is this alcoholic and doesn't have a good relationship with her mother or whatever. It seems like this all kind of stems from the death of her younger sister. Obviously, this led to her spiraling out beyond the alcoholism. She also cut herself a lot. So there's this whole history of that. There's probably a reason why she steers clear of the hometown, but it's all foreshadowing for now. We don't really know exactly where they're going with that. But just to recap quickly, this is the situation with the children. So first, there was Ann Nash. She's the one that was found dead. So she was already found dead. She was riding a bike to a friend's house who apparently lived 10 blocks away. Somewhere in those 10 blocks, she was abducted. She wasn't raped, but she was murdered. And then Natalie Keene represents the second victim. She was the one that was missing at the time of Amy Adams going down to the town. During the course of the episode, they find her dead in an alleyway. So now there's 2 murdered victims, and it seems like the theory of there being serial killers, it seems more plausible now, obviously, than it once was. So that's where we stand with all that. Side note, I love how the bartender tries to impress her. This might have been intentional too, because it's a small town bartender. But she asks for your finest well drink, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, coming right up." And he pours Maker's Mark, which isn't expensive. I mean, it's not it's a little bit more expensive than whatever Bullet Bourbon or whatever you might serve, or some nameless generic brand, but it's not expensive bourbon. So I thought it was funny that he was like, no, you're in town, only the fine stuff for you, and it was $30 bottle of whiskey or whatever. So I thought that was funny, maybe intentional. Like I said, maybe he's just that is his fancy because he's from the small town, doesn't know any better, or maybe they just got an ad deal at Maker's Mark and threw a little, only the finest, and then it's almost like a commercial. But I like to think HBO's above that, but you never know. But yeah, Maker's Mark, real top shelf stuff. But that's one of those things. I love whiskey, so that's one of those things where you have a nurse watching a doctor show, and she's like, "That's not how hospitals really are." For me, it was that's not a good bourbon. It took me out of the show for a second, or like I said, if it was intentional, maybe it brought me further into the show. Who knows? But yeah, there's the old bartender friend. There's a lot of ancillary characters kind of introduced afterwards, but there's the old bartender friend who serves her the Maker's Mark. There's the out-of-town detective who it seems like they have some sort of flirtation, maybe something there, but they're also, kind of in bed together with this case too, metaphorically speaking. So you have that. And then John Keene is the older brother of Natalie Keene. He's maybe a suspect. It seems like there's a lot of suspicions around him. She keeps asking about him. The detective's, staying tight-lipped about it, but it seems like there might be something there. There's something, some vague suspicion around him right now, I'd say, as well. But yeah, that'll probably do it for this, this first companion episode. We're going to be doing basically this, my free thoughts. They're never going to be too long. If you haven't listened to any of our companion shows before, it's basically this. I'll do a little plot recap, add some context to it, give my thoughts on the episode, give my thoughts on the show and the season as a whole and just the way things are going, and that's it. And we'll be coming out with these every single week. So as you watch the show, we'll be doing this. Also, because and this is actually David St. Martin's idea, but the way it works with these weekly episodes, like I'll do one per week, but with the binge watching shows like Netflix, like I think Hulu comes out once a week, right? I'm pretty sure with Handmaid's Tale and all that. I don't know. I got to look into that. But, Amazon Prime, they'll launch like a whole season at once. With those binge watching opportunities, I'll probably just watch it all and then just do like some sort of podcast review at the end, starting with Glow season 2. So I just finished Glow recently, and I'm going to do some sort of review of the entire season podcast that'll be coming out later this week. We're still doing the Succession podcast. That's another short. I didn't even realize I was already invested in it. That's all another 7-episode season, very short. So what was it? Episode 6 just aired. So that episode, that recap for the podcast will be coming out soon. But then episode 7, and then we're just done with that. So it'll be basically Sharp Objects will be my one through line, especially now that Westworld's done. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Just please go visit thedisorderly.com. It's a great website. Lots of great news and headlines and whatever, feature pieces, whatever. There's lots of great things, great content, pretty much covering the spectrum of sports and entertainment. A little bit, we're coming at it from a different angle a little bit, so it should be more interesting. It's not like it's not BuzzFeed or whatever. We're giving you some pretty deep cut stuff, some pretty free flowing, loose stuff like this. Like it's not going to be too rigid. It should be fun. We have a good time with things, and I hope you guys stick around. Thank you for listening. Again, I'm Nick Rizner. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Rizner, NickRizner. Give me a follow, interact with me, DMs open, and I hope to see you guys next week. Peace.